Good evening, folks. Welcome back to another Monday night live stream. Hope you're all doing well. Hope you had a fantastic weekend. And I hope your I hope your Monday, I should say. I hope your Monday is going well so far. Hello to every single one of you. Hope you're all doing fab tonight. Or this morning, or this afternoon, whatever time of the world it is where you are. Let's have a look in the chat and see who we've got tonight, because tonight's chat, as I'm sure you've seen from the thumbnail, we're talking a little bit about 3D printing, but not just 3D printing. I mean, after last week when we talked about Privateer Press sort of moving all of their production to 3D printed miniatures, there's been some kind of developments this weekend, shall we say, over the Gen Con weekend. And we're going to be talking about that. And that leads us on to about the safety of 3D printed miniatures. Anyway, we'll get to that. Let's have a look and see who's in the chat tonight. Lord Maiden was in nice and sharp. Good evening, Ian. How you doing, mate? Super Pumpkin Man, good afternoon to you. Jimmy Moresco, hello in Texas, buddy. How you doing? We got Blizzards. Hello to you. Spunky Taz says, why are you buggers? Tony Howell, good evening to you as well, mate. Hope you're doing well. Blizzards is saying he's figured out what he's painting for the challenge and he's already started on it. That's what I like to see, mate. That's the way to do it. We've got Ari Don, said he's magnetising some bases tonight. Christian Reeves, hello to you, sir. How are you doing? Nice to see you. We've got Tasty Brain Drain saying hello. Ed's in as well there. Major Tom. Spunky Taz says he's searching for some 3D minis tonight to represent his warband in his new 5 Leagues from the Borderlands project. Very nice, mate. Wayne Hayward, good evening to you. Paul Taylor is in as well. Hello, Double Dip, good evening. Bo Paints Mini says, hey, mind if I hang out for a while? You are more than welcome to hang out, my friend. South, good evening to you. Steve Smallworld, good evening, buddy. How you doing? We've also got, let's have a look in here as it just jumps up my screen. We got Kaleo, he said he was looking forward to this, but he's got a work meeting, so he's going to catch it later. You are very welcome, Bo. Busey's in as well there. He says he thinks models are safe, but make sure you print them in the toilet or the bathroom. I'm not necessarily talking about printing miniatures tonight randomly. It's funny, as soon as you start talking about 3D prints, everybody's mind goes 3D printers, sort of STL files. Everybody instantly goes to the production side of things. Nobody goes to the miniatures. And I specifically said in the title, are 3D printed models safe? That's what we're talking about, the actual models themselves, not the process. But we will talk about the process as well. Colin Wakeland, good evening. VJ Morph, good morning to you, mate. Boy, what you want some company? You are very welcome, mate. Gary Morley, hello, mate. He says hi from Nottingham. Hello to you. Colin Mack, good evening, sir. Michael, hello to you as well. Simon Dave is in. Says time for a dose of blackjack. I think you can get cream for that, mate, these days. You just got to rub it in and it all goes away. Ariel's in as well. Hello to you. Bo saying don't drink the resin. Vincent, good evening to you. What's this one? Is it Pesler the Pyrochromatic? Or Polychromatic, sorry. Says hello from Saskatchewan, is that? The live stream is very timely. My new 3D printer is waiting at the post office to be picked up tomorrow. Nice one. Ian, how are you? Do you want some popcorn? I'm very well, mate, thanks. I would actually love some popcorn right now. I haven't got any. I've got my got a glass of water. That's about as close as I get to popcorn tonight, I think. Jez Hunt, good evening to you as well, mate. Last Melon, he said he's picked a great time to take lunch at work. It certainly is a great time, mate. Simon Morton says good evening as well. It's been a while. Nice to see you back, fella. Jez says if I wasn't meant to be drinking this resin, I wouldn't be in my drinking cup. Jeff Higdon, hello to you, mate. He's saying COVID's finally caught him. I hope you're feeling okay, buddy. Mark Horneff says good evening as well. Let's have a little look. Super Punker Man says, at least I've narrowed down what he might paint this month. RG's in as well. He says he's trying to clean up the airbrush so he can join the chat. And Simon Dave says, water in a wine glass, a man of class. It's not actually a wine glass, mate. It's a Stella chalice. I think they call it a chalice, don't they? So the Stella Market and Folks. It's one of those. Oh, it would help if I held it there, wouldn't it? There you go. See, it's just it's the first glass I put my hand on, mate, in the cupboard. That's all it was. Yeah, so as I mentioned before, there's been a bit of, shall we say, drama, a little bit of interest this weekend, because some of the folks in the Patreon Discord chat tonight were just literally talking about Gen Con, because it has been Gen Con this weekend. For those that aren't aware, Gen Con is I think I'm right in saying it is the biggest tabletop gaming convention in the world. And it's held in Indianapolis in the US every August, and I think there was 50,000 attendees. I think that's where I just read today. I'm sure that maybe that number seems a bit small actually, but maybe it was more than that. Jez is saying Nick from the pub. I think it was in one of those kind of like sort of Christmas gifts you get with 2 glasses and a couple of bottles of Stella. I think it was a present from my kids if I remember right. 90k VG is saying that's where it is. I don't know why I had 50k in my head. Yeah, probably more like 90k. And yeah, it's the biggest tabletop convention in the world. And we were just talking about it, saying actually there wasn't that much stuff kind of announced this weekend, or nothing specific that really kind of stood out. However, there was a little bit of drama this weekend, and that's what we're going to talk about. And not play on the drama side of it so much, just talk about the reasons it came up and what the resolution's been, because I think if anybody talked about it at the weekend, there's been some kind of resolutions about it kind of in the last day or so. So I think it's been resolved, and it's probably better to talk about it now with the whole picture and the whole story. Yeah, Tasty Brain Drain saying definitely the biggest one in North America, but I'm pretty sure that's the biggest one in the world. I think the only other one that comes close, mate, is Resin, which is predominantly very much more board games, yeah, I don't think it's as big as Gen Con. Nathan Taylor, good evening to you, mate. VG saying he's been meaning to watch the FFG streams to see if they announced anything I might be interested in. Yeah, it's kind of weird. What used to happen was at Gen Con, people used to look forward to Gen Con because companies would bring all of their new games and kind of announce their new games and have demos of their new games and stuff. Where these days, and because we were chatting about it, I think it was, I forget who it was now, somebody was saying in the chat, I wonder if people's messages kind of get lost when they announce them at Gen Con alongside everybody else's. So these days, they almost announce them prior to Gen Con and say, oh, we're going to be there with this kind of new stuff. And that way they get their little moment of glory, if you like. They get their bit of marketing kind of views. Because I think their message maybe gets lost in the volume of stuff that comes out of Gen Con. Now, I don't know about the FFG stuff, but AMG announced some stuff prior to Gen Con. They were going to announce some stuff at Gen Con, but I think because some of their staff got COVID and the little mini extravaganza thing that they had planned got delayed, and I think it was so close, the re-jig date was so close to Gen Con, I think they ended up just announcing a lot of stuff prior to that. But yeah, I mean, like things like Corvus Belly were there, but they, you know, like the new Code 1 stuff has just gone for pre-order, so that had already been announced. The new stuff for is it, I forget what it's called now, is it Warcrow, the fantasy game, that's all kind of been announced and stuff like that, although you could demo it there, which I think might be the first time that the game's been demoed. So there's quite a lot of sort of stuff seemed to get announced prior to Gen Con. Obviously the Mark IV release for Privateer Press that we were talking about last week, that was all announced beforehand as well. So whilst they did have some miniatures available for folks there to get their hands on for the first time, and that's what we'll be talking about later on. it wasn't kind of new news for Gen Con itself as such. Tizzy Brindrin says, I think Essen is the biggest one in Europe and around the same size as Gen Con. Yeah, I think that's the case, mate. I think it's definitely the biggest in Europe, and I think the UK Games Expo, certainly prior to the COVID times, it certainly is and was the biggest in the UK. But was starting to gather some big numbers, I think, and was kind of getting up there with the bigger conventions. Warcrow, thank you very much, Tissy Braindrain. Austin Thornhill says, hello from Los Angeles. Excited for the chat today. Thank you for joining us, buddy. Thank you very much. Spanky Taz says, did the name Gen Con come from the fact that the creators of D&D, TSR, were based in Lake Geneva in the US? I think it was. I think it basically was like kind of like Geneva Con, not the Geneva Convention. That's something very different. But I think that's where the initial one came from. And Jez is saying, yeah, it was next to Lake Geneva. Exactly, mate. Yeah, the Geneva Convention is slightly different and nothing to do with tabletop games, thankfully. So what's everybody been up to? What you been playing this weekend? Who's been painting? Who's been buying some new toys? Who's looking forward to what? Just nice to see what everybody's up to. We'll give it a couple of minutes, 5 minutes before we start chatting about the main topic. We'll give folks a chance to kind of get their cup of tea and get cozy and get comfy. Jess says, yeah, they like the Geneva Convention pun, apparently. I can imagine, mate. I can imagine it works very, very well. Well, I remember, folks, don't forget, we now have a new BlackJack Legacy Painting Challenge this month, the August Challenge, and the title or the theme this month is August. Therefore, I'm wanting you to paint something that's kind of blowing in the wind, or is basically, like flowing capes or billowing sails on ships, or maybe kind of hair blowing in the wind, or something kind of gliding along, or sort of hot air balloons blowing along, anything like that kind of stuff. Anything you can think of that would qualify as something that is a gust of wind, something is blowing wind, there's maybe smoke trails blowing or something across the miniature. Anything like that, we will include it. Pesler says, Gen Con was originally in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, but it got too big for the area, so they moved it to Indianapolis. If I remember right, it's next to, isn't it? The convention center or the hotel where it is right next to I think it's next to the Indianapolis Colts NFL stadium, and I think some of the con also takes place there as well. Simon Dave says he's been playing a lot of Horus Heresy and painting up some halflings for Kings of War. Salt says he's been trying to paint up some Bushido models for the painting challenge. Hard to motivate myself for it, but I'm making progress at last. Progress is progress, mate. No matter how small, you have picked up a brush and you have made a start. That's the best way, mate. Small steps. Paul is saying he's working on his challenge as well before the last day. Yeah, as I mentioned last week, this is my last live stream for a couple of weeks. I'm going on a holiday with the family this weekend, so I'm going to miss 2 Mondays. There will be some content while I'm away, so it won't be kind of 2 weeks of nothing, if you like. And I will be back, certainly for UK folks anyway. It's the bank holiday Monday, which I think, if I check my dates, is it the 29th or something? Let me double check the dates. Yeah, 29th, which coincidentally is also we'll do the next we'll do all the August paint challenge stuff, show them off then as well. Bruce Patton, nice to see you in, Bruce. How are you doing? Tony said he's finished his Mighty Lancer Games Challenge Mini and he started on the BlackJack Challenge Mini. Nice one, mate. Colin says he's downloaded the remake of Resident Evil to his Xbox. Do you know what, mate? There was an updated version of Resident Evil, which was the original game, if you like improved graphics or remastered, not the kind of fancy looking one, just an improved version of the original one. And I played that, and it felt so clunky in comparison to kind of modern day games. I think the remake stuff's pretty cool though. Blizzard saying, I bought a few things for a top secret project, but I have a bad feeling about it. I wonder what that could be, mate. Busy saying, vacuum seal all resin models for extra safety. Just wrap them in bubble wrap, mate. You don't even have to touch them that way. RG says he had a few games of Dead Zone, Veman versus Forge Fathers, and he's been playing Century Golem Edition and Too Many Bones. Gamer first, painter a long time second. It's good to see me. I like to see people rolling dice. Ariel says he's wondering if he should give Mantic's new Armada taster box a try, or would I be better off getting the starter box instead? It kind of depends, mate, upon how invested you are in it. If you're just wanting to give it a try, you just want to try it out, the starter box is a fantastic way to get 2 ships, one aside, and kind of you get the official kind of the full rule book, the tokens, the dice. It gives you everything you need to give it a try. However, for not a huge amount more money in the starter box, you do get a lot more ships. So if you think you're gonna sort of, this is something that you're 90% sure you're gonna enjoy, I'd personally recommend just going straight for the starter box. But if you literally, as it's called, a taster box, if you just want to dip your toe in, maybe sort of have a look at it, even if you sold on the rule book afterwards, you'll almost claw back most of your money kind of thing. So if it wasn't for you, for example. Louis Drake, nice to see you in, Louis. Jess is saying one of the Slain figures has blowy hair, so I'm taking that as a tenuous link. That works for me, mate, that works. Steve said he's stuck in the new Dragonlance book at the minute, so he's not doing much tabletop, just the weekly board game night. Nice one. Tizzy Brain Drinks over the weekend. He got to work on some more Imperial Specialists for Star Wars Legion. Double Dip's been painting some Chaos Renegades for Blood Bowl. Nathan Taylor says, should have Dead Zone 3rd edition arriving tomorrow. Look forward to building, painting the Space Skaven, Vigaman, as your May 2020 vid. Good times. Yeah, I remember, God, that was a little while ago I painted that. That was over 2 years ago now. Mark saying he started the long job of sorting the shed and found he glued some Wraith of Kings models. There you go. Christian sharing the link there as well for the Patreon. Thank you very much. We've had a nice little influx of Patreon members over the last month, which has been really, really nice. It's not only is it kind of, I really appreciate the support, and obviously it helps me continue to do this full time, because that is kind of a big chunk of the income that I get every month. But it's also it gives you a nice warm fuzzy feeling as well that people kind of supporting what I do. So whilst I do rely upon the income, I also really, really appreciate the kind of the sentiment and the people almost putting their money where their mouth is kind of thing with support. So thank you very much, folks. If anybody would like to join, it starts at $2 per month. And for that $2, you gain access to a private Discord. There is other sort of layer levels as well, and tiers, which I'm kind of looking at the moment. So there might be some changes coming in the near future. But I'll probably spend a bit of time when I'm on holiday these next few weeks just fine-tuning that stuff. VJ says if he had his time again, he'd get a taster box, as I didn't really want either of the factions. Yeah, there is that, mate. I guess the other side of it is, if you don't really want the factions, you kind of might as well just buy the rule book and buy the factions you want. Because if you buy the taster box, you get the rule book and the tokens, which is about 30 quid, and then you get 2 ships that you'll not use if that was the case. So yeah. Coneman Dan says he's painting some Orc Boys. Wayne's painting some Walkers and British Airborne and parts of a Land Raider. He says the Walkers are Walking Dead Walkers. Nice one. Nice. So we've got a nice little kind of gang in now, and I think what we'll do is then we'll kick off. And I will, if I switch across to here, because last week's clipping out of the video seemed to go down a bit of a treat. It did pretty well. So I think we're gonna kind of try and do the same again. I do appreciate there's a lot of folks that are not interested in kind of in watching a full live stream to kind of see what the salient parts are so much. So these work really well when I've got something specific to talk about. So over the weekend, we did have a Gen Con, and funnily enough, Privateer Press and War Machine news is a bit like buses. We wait about 5 years for anything, and then 2 come at once. So last week we were talking about the fact that Privateer Press are changing their War Machine models from resin and plastic and metal and stuff over to 3D printed miniatures, which they are 3D printing in-house and then selling sort of out to retailers and selling direct in that format. And over the weekend, as I said, it was Gen Con, and they managed to get together quite a few sort of boxes and bits and pieces to be able to actually sell some at Gen Con. And they also sent out some samples to some of their loyal fans, shall we say. So let's have a little look at this, and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. So this was War Machine, this was Privateer Press at Gen Con. They had boxes and boxes of their Mark IV battle, I think they call battle groups. And These were all the 3D printed ones. I think we can. It's fair to say they've obviously kind of sort of tried their best to get as many as they could ready to take to Gen Con and show them off. They wanted to get them into people's hands and let people see them. They actually put them up for pre-order over the weekend as well, and had to turn off the pre-orders because they were selling so well that they were concerned that basically it would put into jeopardy the production to get things out into retail. So yeah, from all accounts, it seemed to be selling quite well. Now, this is what they were selling over the weekend. They were selling some of these Mark IV preview battle groups, one for Signar, one for Kador, and one there for the Orgoth Sea Raiders. And so those were the three different boxes. Now, over the weekend, what happened was somebody bought one of these boxes from the Privateer Press stand and then wrote this review on Facebook. Now, I'll read the majority of it because I appreciate it's not the most interesting thing to see on screen. But it said this, and I've intentionally taken the person's name off, not to credit them, just because I didn't want to kind of sort of single them out or kind of put their name up on here. But if they watch this and they want crediting for it, I will certainly credit them in the comments. But I wasn't trying to kind of be funny or anything. So this was their somewhat lengthy review of the Mark IV starters that I got at Gen Con. It says, after getting back to his room on day of gaming, I took a closer look at the two starters I picked up at Gen Con. All the pictures are of the parts right out of the box with no prep done to them, and I'm going to show you those pictures next. It says, the digital sculpts that I'd seen online are as great as I expected, but the product in the box, however, is a solid meh for me. I will point out I have 3D photo resin print. I will point out I have a 3D photo resin printer, and I have printed out figures non-stop for the last year. So the person that sort of did this review, if you like, has experience of 3D printed miniatures. All the faults in the boxes I got tie back to the same issues I had when first learning to print. I feel that whatever printer they are using, the print plate layout is fine. The post-print process seems to be the issue. The details are too soft in some places, and some of the parts still have uncured resin in the deep cuts. We'll come back to that uncured resin bit because this is important. Not a smell, the parts are still sticky and the resin started burning my fingers. This was the bit for me that kind of set a few alarm bells ringing, and is kind of the concerns about where sort of this live stream's come about are resin 3D prints safe. Considering that resin is pretty toxic when uncured, it's not that great to find. Also, some of the parts are flexible, like they were not cured long enough. In my opinion, the post-print rinse was not clean, or they were not rinsed long enough. If the rinse step is not done correctly, there will be a thin layer of uncured resin that will then be cured in the last cure step, which will soften out the details and highlight the layer lines. I feel these are things that can be fixed if they take the time to get the post-process right, but with the boxes I got, at least, they're still not there. Still a big believer in 3D printing, and I'm sure they will be great once all steps are right. And then these were the pictures that they showed. Now bear in mind, these are super zoomed in. They're big pictures as well. I'm going to zoom in further into them, which probably doesn't do them any favors. Bear in mind, these things are pretty tiny. So you can see, if I zoom in here, you can see some of the things they're talking about. They're talking about some of these lines in here. They're talking about some of these layer lines in here. For those that don't know, essentially the way a resin 3D printer works is it breaks down the model into basically slices. And what it will do, it basically sort of shines a UV light through a negative image to create that layer. And then the whole layer moves up, and it does the same thing underneath it. So you have very definite layers which are all basically sort of cured together. If you do it right, you don't see those kind of layer lines, or they're certainly not as definitive as you can see here. And these are the things that the person was kind of explaining about. You can see here there's a little bit of kind of these lines here. There's a little bit of almost like slip as it's kind of coming off the bed a little bit where the layers haven't quite lined up. And I think, is it the next one? Let's skip ahead slightly. This is the one that really, I think, it would kind of garnered, I should say, the most attention. There's some very, very definite layer lines on here. You quite often can see them on curved, like rounded parts, because you obviously can't get a perfectly smooth round surface by kind of sort of layering up layer after layer. However, the thinner those layers are, the more smooth that will be. But this was the stuff as well that they were talking about, this kind of white residue that was in the recesses that obviously hasn't been cleaned out properly, And this is what they were saying was uncured resin, and it did apparently kind of sort of had a burning sensation. Now, this is the problem with this kind of stuff, is that if you do ever send out uncured resin, resin is not a nice substance. We'll come on to that kind of later on. And this is obviously a worry that there'll be staff that's been handling it in the warehouse, and then if it goes out to customers, there's a potential to kind of cause some harm. However, that wasn't what happened here. And we'll get to that later on. But at this point in time, when this was first kind of sort of brought to people's attention, there was a concern that uncured resin had gone out into people's hands. So, that's the kind of the quality issues and the safety issues that were being discussed at the time. You can kind of see here as well. There's obviously some more on there as well. But we'll skip over these pictures as you get the impression of what the person was talking about. I think this one's important because we're going to come back to this part later on, but you can definitely see some kind of curves here around the arm part, and there's definitely lots of that kind of sort of residue in these parts here as well. Anyway, so what happened was, obviously Privateer Press obviously saw this information and were quick to try and sort of respond to it. And this was their reply at the time. It said, "We understand there are concerns over safety of our new production resin. We had the same concerns for our own production and packing staff. To ensure well-being of all parties involved from conception of this production process, we put several practices in place to help guarantee the safety of all those that handle our products and chose materials based on safety and durability." I won't read it in detail. This is still up there on the website, on the Privateer Press website. On the Privateer Press Facebook page, I should say. But they basically then go through a full detailed breakdown of what their process is after printing, how they clean it, and basically how they basically try and clean it. And what they said was that they realised that because they're unfamiliar to this process, it's new to them, they realised that they need to change out the contents of their ultrasonic cleaners much more frequently to avoid a slight white chalky texture from appearing on surfaces and in cracks. With all parts different shapes and sizes and being processed in such large volumes, we had to increase our minimum cure times to ensure some parts didn't get less than a minimum standard. As we rise to the exciting challenge of fully mastering this constantly advancing and evolving production method, there will inevitably be growing pains. And then they basically said they would vow to make good. If anybody wasn't happy with any product that they got, they would certainly change it out. And they also said that basically if anybody did get anything like that they felt was uncured resin, would they please bring it back to the stand? They didn't believe it was uncured resin, but they wanted to kind of see these samples for themselves so they could fully investigate it. They then go on to say that said, this resin's not much different from other resins in that you should always be careful when handling it. Whenever sanding a resin, you should always use a respirator, use a wet sanding technique, and one should always clean their work area and wash their hands after working with resin. This is true. It doesn't matter if you're using cast resin or you're using 3D printed resin. Even once it's fully cured, you still have to be a little bit careful with it. You shouldn't be you don't want to get anything in your mouth. If you're sanding it to kind of file off any sort of sharp edges, you should be using a wet sanding because the dampness will basically stop it from becoming dusty around the area, and you certainly don't want to be breathing it in. So what they're saying is factually right. So at this point in time, this was them responding to the fact that they thought they might have had an issue. Now, the interesting bit and the little bit of drama that kind of broke out was not that long after. In fact, if I go back one, so this was, those times at the top there are UK times. So you can imagine this was happening over in Indianapolis at the time. So the actual times will have been slightly different. But if this was 6:30 in the UK, at 1 o'clock in the morning in the UK, so what's that, about 6 hours later, roughly 6.5 hours, Broken Anvil Miniatures, and we'll get back to Broken Anvil Miniatures in a minute, Broken Anvil Miniatures put this up on their Facebook page, saying, understanding not all 3D prints are the same. Now, Broken Anvil Miniatures, for those that don't know, are the company that makes Rivenstone. They also do some sort of 3D printed files as well. And they are also in Seattle as well, in Washington over in the States. And some of their staff for Broken Anvil Miniatures used to be ex-Privateer Press staff. So there's a little bit of sort of history, shall we say, there. I'm not saying there's any bad blood. I don't know anything about what's happened in the past. They could all be best of friends for all I know, but it seemed very strange that the one company that threw a little bit of shade, shall we say, or threw a little bit of mud at a time when privateer press could have been going through a little bit of maybe a safety issue, shall we say, was a company that was in the same town and was staffed by some ex-privateer press staff, which I thought was a little bit weird. But we'll read what they say. It's common to see prominent build layers in 3D prints produced on first and second generation consumer-grade resin printers. So I think what they are saying is the printers that privateer press are using are old consumer grade printers, or they're not very good at setting them up, shall we say. Now, I've got a consumer grade printer. I've got a 4K resin printer. It's not one of the latest ones. My printer does not leave layer lines like that, shall we say. Any sufficiently maintained modern high resolution printer stocked with high quality resin has the capability to produce models with far less obvious artifacting. So there's the kind of like the second dig that they were giving them, is like, not only are you probably using old printers, but you're probably not using good quality resin, and you can do a better job than that. It's possible to virtually eliminate all visible build layers through thoughtful orientation of a model on the build plate, a critical quality assurance process we employ for all our pre-supported Broken Anvil monthly models. We want to ensure that excessive artifacting won't interfere with our subscribers' painting experience, especially as applying washers and dry brushing will painfully highlight every defect in the surface of a print. So again, what they're kind of saying is that these layer lines will show up even worse if you kind of dry brush them, which, to be fair, I think is a fair comment, but it is very obviously kind of pointing the finger in the privateer press direction. When purchasing 3D printed minis from any major manufacturer, don't settle for poor quality prints priced to match premium resin casts. Ouch. Come see us at Gen Con booth 1834 and check out our mini stuff. So, and then they said, see the difference for yourself and please feel free to zoom in. They then attached a picture, which I'll show you. Now, the interesting thing is the hashtags that they put at the bottom of this. Hashtag no edits, hashtag no processing, hashtag 3D printing, all this kind of stuff. No excuses, professional 3D printer. Now, interestingly, when I cut out this picture, there's been some edits to the latest one, because the one I took a picture of on Saturday when it happened was, in fact, this one. And you can see at the bottom here, there's some different hashtags. And one of them was hashtag Warhammer community, hashtag no gaslighting, which I didn't really understand. I mean, I'm aware what gaslighting is. I'm not sure what they were suggesting about their they were gaslighting their consumers, or they were pointing the finger at maybe privateer press for gaslighting. But however, they have gone back and edited this, so as you can see, that is now no longer in that comment. Now, as you can imagine, this basically created a lot of kind of chat online. There was a mixture of people being very defensive about privateer press, saying, I think it's disgraceful that you're basically that you, Broken Anvil Miniatures, are responding in this way. And they also then kind of come back with some sort of short comments, as if to say, I don't really care what you think. Yeah, I'm paraphrasing, that's not what they said. But those were the kind of like, well, like we're just telling it like it is, if you want quality miniatures, come to us kind of thing. So there was a whole host of drama and chat, shall we say. After a little while, I didn't show you this picture. So this was the picture that they showed, and if you zoom in, as you can see, there doesn't appear to be any of those kind of layer lines. Of course, in this particular model, there isn't any of that kind of residue. I'm not suggesting that their models come with residue, but I'm suggesting that if they were going to take a picture of it, it certainly wouldn't be in the picture. But there's certainly less in the way of layer lines. So this was the picture that they were kind of have shown off. Now, the 6th of August, which was the later on the Saturday, it must have been, was it? Or did it all kick off on the Friday? I don't know now. This was Broken Anvil Miniatures after taking a little bit of flack from the community, but some people were supporting what they were saying. Some people were a little bit annoyed that they were kind of like sort of sort of thrown a little bit of mud at Privateer Press. And they said to the Broken Anvil Miniatures family and tabletop community at large, we made a post yesterday regarding 3D printed products that stirred a large response. I will second that, it did. We want you to know we heard you, and upon further reflection, we need to apologise for our tone. Now, this is important because they're apologising for their tone. They're not apologising for what they said. They're apologising for how they said it. This says there's a lot of love and passion that flows in this industry, and we understand people take immense pride in the games they invest time and money in to play. We ourselves feel strongly that all players deserve high quality items from companies like ourselves in return for that support. However, that passion led us to make a careless statement that doesn't reflect or support the type of community we want to build and represent. So as I said before, they weren't really apologising for what they said, they were apologising for the fact that it seemed very negative. When you're in the business of building communities to support yourself, it seemed like a bit of a strange kind of approach. They say, while the core of our statement remains true, we realise we also bring tens of thousands of hours of printing R&D to our process that's difficult to attain for many teams. In the spirit of doing better and putting community first, we want to put our money where our mouth is. To any company that wants to level up their 3D printing operations, we would like to offer free consultation on production printing and share our professional knowledge, just as we do with our BAM community. Our goal as a team must be to always build up a community at large for its long-term health and success. We want to thank you all for keeping us accountable for that. We look forward to making new connections and making good on our ideas. So there was a little bit of backtracking there from Broken Anvil Miniatures. Again, not really apologising for what they said, just in the tone that they said it. Now, at this point, going on with the drama, Privateer Press then basically had received the miniature back from the person that had did the initial review, the initial complaint, and they basically said that they didn't get any others back. Nobody else brought back anything with any uncured resin or reports of uncured resin. And what they said was this, and this came out yesterday, a quick update regarding the uncured resin. The customer who purchased the preview battle group at Gen Con and believed they received product with uncured resin was able to return it to the booth on Saturday with the model kit. After thorough inspection of each part, we were able to determine that what was being interpreted as uncured resin was in fact, as we expected, residue from the ultrasonic cleaning process. The models were entirely cured, but detritus from the ultrasonic cleaning process had deposited a bit of a chalky build-up. We've addressed this issue after noticing it during our original production run, and we're increasing the frequency of cycling on our ultrasonic units. I won't go into the full details here, but they're saying that it's if you do get a one like this, they're very easy to clean up with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol and maybe like a soft toothbrush. But if you do get some and you're not happy with it, they will happily replace them or refund. And that basically, they're saying that you should always practice safety when working with resin, wearing a respirator, sanding, using wet sanding as they mentioned before, and a thank you to the customer for taking the time to bring the part back to the booth. We take the health and wellness of our customers seriously. Now, it is worth noting that the customer who did take this back exchanged it for another battle group. They didn't get a refund. They also randomly mentioned in their post that they hadn't checked it yet. If that had been me, I think I'd have checked it at the booth. I think I'd have opened the box and had a look inside and made sure that I was happy with it. But they said they hadn't checked the replacement yet, which I thought was strange, but everyone's different. But basically, it looks like Privateer Press made a few kind of models that they realised they had an issue with, put a new process in place to improve upon it, and then ended up somehow letting some of them get out into these things. Now, I imagine with sort of doing everything last minute, getting stuff out to Gen Con, I can imagine this would have caused kind of a few issues. However, the interesting point is that other people were posting pictures as well, and a lot of those issues that they were talking about weren't kind of very obvious. So as you can see here, this was somebody else that posted pictures of them after they'd built their models, and those layer lines are very, very much less noticeable. There are some little bits of white stuff on here, but the person actually mentions in their post that they were clipping off a few bits and there was some kind of shavings of bits of resin that were flicking about. So I think actually in this instance it's not that kind of residue buildup, because it's kind of loose bits that's lying about where they've been sort of cleaning up the resin parts. But there's definitely, especially on those kind of rounded areas across the top here and things, across the top of the head, there is definitely less in the way of those visible layer lines, and certainly none of that kind of resin buildup. And so what I would say is, I think I'm willing to give Private Ear Press the benefit of the doubt here. I think that it looks like it's very early in the process. They've been working exceptionally hard to try and get some stuff out for Gen Con, and maybe their QA processes aren't sort of up to speed just yet, and a few little things have kind of gotten out there. I think the difference with this kind of stuff, I think that is the last picture there, yeah. The difference with this kind of stuff is the fact that people have this kind of equipment at home, and they can very easily compare to what they can produce themselves. And it instantly kind of sort of sets a few kind of like flags, or people think that they're experts in 3D printing and can't wait to kind of give their advice. If you look at a metal model, they're not perfectly smooth, you know, like they kind of have like a bit of a rough texture to them. I've bought plenty of plastic minis in the past that have kind of soft sculpts on, or not the sharpest of sculpts and things. So I don't think these issues are necessarily kind of like, they're not a Private Ear Press problem. But when you're charging premium prices, people expect a premium product, and I completely get that. I think we might talk at some point in the future about when we talk about premium pricing and stuff, and the difference between 3D printing something at home and buying a 3D printed miniature from a retailer. Because there might be a difference in price, but there's also a whole difference in lots of things in that equation as well. But to get back to the main point, are 3D printed miniatures safe? They're as safe as anything else, really, as long as you handle them correctly. In the same way that, you know, like water's dangerous. How many people fall in water and drown every year, kind of thing. Water can be dangerous. Knives are dangerous, but every home has lots of them. It's more to do with how you handle stuff. But Private Ear Press are going to have to kind of like, this has raised its head. It's one of those harsh things that somebody sets the ball rolling. It sets off bad press, talking about uncured resin getting out and harming people, when it turns out that it's not uncured resin. So I feel a little bit for Private Ear Press in this regard. And especially with Broken Anvil Miniatures kind of throwing a little bit of mud at them, which seemed a bit weird. But it looks like it's been a bit of an isolated instance. So it's going to be something to watch in the future, something to keep an eye on. But yeah, 3D printed miniatures, it's going to be an interesting ride, I think, this one. So, what do you think, folks? What do you think about it? What do you think about the drama that kind of occurred? Do you agree with Broken Anvil Miniatures? Do you think they're right to kind of call that kind of stuff out? I think it's it's a weird one, really. I mean, it's like, I'm not disagreeing with what they said, but if you go into their comments, because that thread is still on their Facebook page, although to be fair, because they've edited some of the hashtags, they could have edited some of their comments as well. I screenshotted some of those comments on Saturday as well when I first read it. So if I have a little look on here, is there anything specific that I kind of noted? I think there was some comments about like somebody had said, this is excellent. So this was on the Broken Anvil Miniatures page. Somebody said, this is excellent. Broken Anvil Miniatures would never put toxic product in the hands of customers. And they replied saying, absolutely not. And then somebody else said, this seems like a direct dig at the community concerns from Private Ear Press's new venture. Not concerned one way or the other, just kind of funny looking forward to both companies' new upcoming products. So yeah. It's there was a lot of thing on there, and then Broken Anvil Miniatures replied saying, not taking shots, we are just letting the community know that they do not need to settle for less. Any competitor gaslighting the community, this is the gaslighting bit, deserves to be held to a higher standard and called out when doing so, especially one with long lineage. So I thought it was quite interesting that they were basically replying to these things. Like somebody else had said, the fact you are jumping onto a hate wagon started by some weird units against a company that a bunch of you guys had as a previous employer, it's rude, it's unprofessional, and it's petty. And their response was, sorry you feel that way, but we do not enjoy seeing the community being lied to and gaslit, especially when we know better and we know that you, the consumer, deserves better. So it was a bit of a weird one. I don't know how I feel about these companies kind of like sort of going like sort of at each other like that. Like it's almost a case of like, by all means talk about how good your stuff is, but you almost don't need to say how bad somebody else is in order to kind of raise yourself above it. You'd like to think that your quality speaks enough, and especially bearing in mind that they're companies that are almost closely related in terms of kind of staff moving from one to the other as well. Let's have a little look here. I'm not going to go into all of the comments because there's quite a lot of chat here going backwards and forwards. But I'll pick some bits out. Andra saying, hello, would like to ask you about Mantic Games. In our country, the Czech Republic, it's almost impossible to buy anything from this company. Do they prefer only bigger markets? I don't think it's that. I think it's probably more to do with distributors. I don't think they distribute directly themselves. They use other distributors. And I guess it's whether those distributors are in those markets. I don't think it's necessarily a Mantic choice as far as I'm aware. I think it's probably more to do with probably sort of whether those regions have a sort of like a pull for that kind of product, to be fair. VJ, thank you very much for the super chat, mate. He said, treat yourself, Lou and Jackson, to an ice cream on your holiday. Thank you very much, mate. I appreciate that. I'll get back down to that bit in a second. Where were we up to here? Perham saying uncured resin is a serious issue. It isn't hard to clean as long as you keep your vat fresh. Yeah, and I think that was the thing. I think if it had been uncured resin, then fair enough. I think all of the digs maybe kind of would have been fair, but as it happened, it wasn't. But by that point, that kind of message is out there at that point, isn't it? Even though it was wrong. Pezler saying, from what I understand, anti-aliasing and blurring helps mitigate the lines. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think it sounds like they just had, maybe one of their printers wasn't set right, or it was one of the early prints when they were kind of fine-tuning things, and maybe somehow it got out there. Because certainly a lot of the ones I've seen online, like for example, if I show you this, let's go to here. Like these are some of the these were some of the ones that people were showing off. And if I just pause it there, this was the shield in the hand that I was talking about before. And this one that the person in the video here is kind of like is showing around was definitely didn't have those same issues. It's exactly the same part and didn't have, let me just kind of scroll forward a little bit. So on these kind of rounded edges, it definitely it didn't have the same issues. And then of course there was a video that Matt Wilson from Privateer Press, who I believe is the CEO. If I can see the video, this was it. I think it was the one I showed last week where I was putting the magnet bits on. This particular model here as well, if I can pause it at a part that's not too blurred. Let's see what I can get. There we go. Can I zoom in on this one? Let me see if I can. Can I zoom? Randomly, I'm zooming in there and it's getting smaller. Those rounded areas here around the knee, around the top, around the shoulder, around on the gun here as well, seem really, really smooth. They seem awesome. So I do wonder whether it was just kind of like, whether it was a small issue that, an isolated instance where something's kind of got out there, and obviously they'll keep on top of that type stuff. Steve Smallworld says, looks like the figures were not cleaned well and cured when still wet. Yeah, I think there's an element of that as well. I think they go through it in some detail in their comments about what their process is, and they've since kind of they'd found some issues, improved on the process, but it sounds like maybe some of those early ones had got out there. Christian saying as well, also don't forget, the more you're exposed to certain chemicals, the lower your tolerance becomes. It's why you should always use gloves and preferably a mask with resin and isopropyl alcohol. I absolutely 100% agree on that as well, mate. There was something that cropped up in our Facebook group at the weekend, and I kind of jumped on it a little bit because somebody was suggesting that they were quite happy putting their fingers into the vat of resin and that they'd had no issues. And I said I completely condone, I cannot condone it. I condemned those kind of comments. Like you should wear safety glasses. If you're resin 3D printing, you should be wearing safety glasses. You don't want resin splashing your eye for the safe to wear, for the kind of like the small inconvenience of wearing a pair of safety specs. You do not want resin in your eyes. You should always be wearing the sort of nitrile or not rubber gloves. I forget. I think it is the nitrile gloves. I think it is. You should also always be wearing the right safety gloves. I would suggest even putting an apron or something on just to stop anything getting on your clothes. If any of it splashes on your skin, you should wash it off immediately. Get it straight washed off. Don't kind of leave it until later. You should have decent extraction in the room as well to get rid of any fumes or any smells. Even if you get the stuff that doesn't smell particularly very strong, just because you can't smell it doesn't mean it's not doing you any harm. Like, as I mentioned before, like water is dangerous. People drown in it. Knives are dangerous because people get stabbed with them. But we don't ban all this kind of stuff. You know, you clean your bathroom, you clean your toilet with bleach, which again is dangerous. Everything is dangerous if handled incorrectly. It's about taking the right safety precautions and handling them in a safe manner. And if people basically follow the process, then they're safe to use. And it's the same with resin miniatures as well. If you start sanding them down and blowing the dust around, that resin dust is dangerous. You do not want to get that onto your chest and into your lungs. So you should take precaution. You shouldn't be breathing it in. You should wash down your area when you're finished. You should wash your hands when you're finished handling resin miniatures. So it's like, are they safe? Yes, they are safe if you follow safe procedures. Like you wouldn't kind of put a resin miniature in your mouth and like suck on it kind of thing, would you? That would be stupid. But it doesn't mean that they are unsafe, sort of inherently unsafe. VJ saying broken anvil of the company that annoyed him with Rivenstone. They definitely marketed it hard, shall we say. And Scanner Bartley saying, the old broken anvil miniatures drama. Yes, mate. Spunky Taz says, yeah, Bam trying to walk it back but still failing to get back over the line of being dickheads. It seemed like a strange move. I can't really put my finger on why you would do that. I mean, it was a long-winded post. They'd intentionally added a photograph to it to kind of show off the quality of their stuff. They'd intentionally put those weird hashtags on about gaslighting. It seemed like a very intentionally directed dig at Privateer Press, but for no real reason. The fact that they've gone back and edited it and then gone back and also had an apology just kind of shows that it was probably the wrong thing to do in the first place. Scott Latham, good evening to you, mate. How are you doing? Perham saying, yeah, it tracks with the experience. When the wash gets too dirty, you get the chalky stuff. Yeah, I've seen that as well, mate. Pesla says, is there a hole in its right arm? The arms come with sort of like recesses in them, mate, to put magnets in so you can magnetize all the different weapon options. Bruce says, I'm confused. The white residue on cured resin is usually from leftover moisture. When the model gets cured, the layer lines can be minimized with cure times and layer heights. It doesn't seem like a big deal. And I think that's what it was, mate. I think it was the fact that the person that posted it basically said that that it was uncured resin, that they had lots of experience, it wasn't uncured resin, and that they'd kind of burned their fingers, if you like, which is, I think, is what set the alarm bells ringing. It turns out it wasn't uncured resin. I don't know where the comment about burning their fingers come from, and I would suggest that maybe they didn't have as much experience as they first said, if that was the case. VJ saying, yeah, as I said in the Discord, old Joe Cheeto fingers got to jump in with 3D printing advice. If anything, that's what's going to shoot them in the foot. It was a little bit. The comments did become kind of flooded. Like, there's the old joke, isn't there, about how do you know when somebody's got a 3D printer? Don't worry about it, they'll tell you, kind of thing. And the comments were like that in the Facebook groups. It was like everybody saying, well, you should do this and you should do that, and you're not doing this and you're not doing that, and your process is wrong, and I would do this. It ended up kind of just devolving into like a I know best kind of thing. And unfortunately, that wasn't really helping anyone at that point. Yeah, Yeah, Tasty Brain Drain saying Broken Anvil's actions seem a little sketchy if you ask me. I'll be honest, I've not had anything to do with Broken Anvil Miniatures. I've not really had anything to do with Privateer Press. I'm not taking sides in this. I don't have a horse in the race, if you like. All I would suggest is that there are pictures of the Privateer Press models kicking about that people bought at the weekend that look absolutely fine, and then there is that one picture that one person got that looked pretty awful. And if everybody got that quality, I'm sure we'd have heard a lot more about it. So it was kind of like I just thought the whole how it exploded, and I think it exploded because it's 3D printing and everybody thinks they know best. And the fact that kind of just while it was smouldering away in the background, Broken Anvil Miniatures seemed to kind of pour a little bit of fuel on the fire and just kind of set a flame to it. So it was just weird to watch. It was a weird one. Scanner Bartley saying, yeah, you can have these conversations without throwing shade. It was obviously something that got heated because about 4 of the Broken Anvil Miniatures folks are former Privateer Press employees. Yeah, and I've got no idea whether it was anything to do with the ex-Privateer Press staff, the ones that were kind of posting this stuff. I don't know if it was just some rogue sort of marketing person or kind of social media person. It was the fact that not only did they post this comment, they were then going into the comments and replying to people's comments and almost like just digging a bit deeper with some of the comments. I found a bit strange. Pauliman, good evening, mate. He's saying, yeah, seems pretty classless of BAM to say that. Didn't need to say anything at all. That was kind of my thoughts. You know, if you've got nothing nice to say, don't say anything. By all means, tell everybody how nice your stuff is. You don't need to kind of criticize other people's stuff a little bit. Yeah, Bruce is saying, don't bathe in resin and don't drink it. 100%. Simon Dave saying Broken Anvil's comments seem like a bad PR move. If the quality is better, let that speak for itself. 100%, mate. Yeah, having a dig at PP makes them look a bit daft. And as always happens in these kind of situations, you get the kind of the fanboys on both sides. You had the Privateer Press fans who were basically, and I don't mean the fanboys as in a negative comment. I just mean the fans, the strong supporters. You get the Privateer Press fans who were like, well, that's disgraceful, you can't say that kind of thing. And then you get the Broken Anvil Miniatures fans saying, that's it, you tell them, like, look how good your stuff is, look how bad everybody else's is, kind of thing. So it was a bit of a weird like thing there. Perham saying PP need to improve their process. Yeah, and I think they had. Like I say, I think they had improved their process, and I think unfortunately some of those models got out there. As happens these days, you know, social media is such a kind of like a in your face. If anything ever goes slightly wrong, everybody gets to find out about it. It doesn't matter whether what you say is correct in terms of the resin bits. It doesn't matter like about the uncured resin. It doesn't matter if that's true or not. It's out there at that point and it's being said, and everybody thinks you're shipping out unsafe product, even if that's not the case. Yeah, and Perham saying, yeah, mostly a non-issue in the end. Now PP's learned the lesson. Yeah, and like I say, I think they'd learned the lesson prior to that. Mark says you can have uncured resin with home printing if you're not careful with how you hollow and cure models. I do not think that will happen with professional 3D prints. I think the problem, mate, is that I think they're still quite new to it themselves, and I think they're still fine-tuning their process. I think in this case, as I just said before there, I think as soon as you say uncured resin and safety concerns, that's the bit everybody's kind of focused on, even though that wasn't the issue. And there have been, as far as I'm aware, there have been no reports of uncured resin leaving kind of Privateer Press's facilities. So unfortunately, that's the narrative that's out there at that point, isn't it? Regardless of whether it's right or not. Yeah, Louis saying there, it looks like BAM took the I'm saying Louis, I don't know whether it's Lewis or Louis, I apologise. Says seems like BAM took the low road. They could have said something along the lines of, we know it's tough getting started, give us a call. Yeah, and it was kind of weird at that point, like in the apology, to say, oh, if anybody wants any help, we're here to help, kind of thing. At that point, you would almost kind of say, I don't care how helpful you are at that point. Why would I invite you in to kind of like to come in after what you've said? It's a bit late now. It's a bit of a weird statement. Let's have a little look here. We're just where are we up here? Conman Dan saying it reflects the company in a bad light when you take cheap digs. Yeah, it's a bit like me kind of sitting here and slating other other YouTube channels saying I didn't like that video and I don't think they're very good kind of thing. It's a weird thing. It's a weird thing to do. Austin saying, I think BAM saw this as an opportunity to talk about their value proposition, but it was done in poor taste. Yeah, I do wonder, like, I know that they're probably a relatively new company, and you don't know the circumstances, and you know, like, people can make mistakes, and you know, you have to learn from mistakes in the same way Privately Oppressed have learned from some mistakes that they had in their process. I'd like to think that Broken Anvil Miniatures have learned from some of the mistakes that they have in their PR stuff. You know, like nobody got hurt. Like, you know, let's give people the benefit of the doubt and give them a second chance to put things right. But it just seemed like a really weird move. Blizzard saying, reminds me of some old WWE beefs. Mark saying he loves using his 3D printer for minis, gives him a lot of minis to print, and it can test out different printing methods without worrying about painting the model. Yeah, exactly, mate. Camo, hello, mate. Legionnaire says, how many of these print lines are seriously going to be visible once you prime the model? There were a lot of comments about that, mate, as well. And to be fair, I think once you prime the model, that definitely lessens it. I think if you're going to dry brush a kind of a curved surface with layer lines like that, it will show up. However, in the grand scheme of things, is it really the end of the world? To me personally, it's not. But by the same stretch, I haven't got one in my hand, and I haven't paid sort of like $75 for it. And if I had, I might be more annoyed about it. I might even be more annoyed by the fact that not every model looks like that. If that was just the quality of them, then you pay your money, you take your choice. I think it's the fact that there was a mixture of some had the problem, some didn't, or one had the problem and the rest didn't, kind of thing. So I know what you're saying, but at the end of the day, if it's not meant to look like that, that's the difference. If they're intentionally selling like that and they meant to look like that, people can kind of criticize it. But if they're not meant to look like that, which the other ones didn't seem to be, then I guess that's then you got every right to return it. Yeah, Louis is saying it seems like whoever's running their PR isn't familiar with slander or libel. I think it's interesting because they never specifically call out Privately Oppressed by name, and I think that's when you get into slander and libel. They didn't actually say anything about Privately Oppressed. It was interesting timing, shall we say. Yeah, Canto39 saying getting a cure and wash station is the way to go. Yeah, I've got one of those as well, and I find it really useful. I guess when you're doing it on an industrial scale, I guess they've probably got some different kind of systems. Yeah, Perham saying you had resin in his eyes once. It was horrible. I can imagine, mate. Jess is saying hot nerd on nerd bitching. 100%. Canto saying he uses dishwashing gloves. Yeah, I got some kind of sort of like rubber nitrile gloves. I used to use the disposable gloves, but I got some sort of nitrile gloves. So if I was just kind of moving things around, I used the kind of the big, thick, heavy ones. And if I'm doing something that needs to be a little bit more intricate, I was just using the kind of tighter fitting disposable ones and getting rid of those. Yeah, Jez is saying it's rare to see controversy that doesn't involve GW. I know. What a difference a day makes, eh, mate? Steve says large flat areas, robes that you can't orientate to remove lines. Spray putty is great to fill them in a light sand. Yeah, I think like people definitely know those layer lines more with the PLA printing, you know, like the plastic stuff with terrain and stuff like that. I think people are certainly more familiar with that kind of bits and pieces. But yeah, randomly it seemed strange that those particular ones didn't look great. Yeah, Busey saying if you don't own safety glasses or even a pair of sunglasses or normal glasses are better than nothing. I'll be honest, mate, if you've spent your money on a Resin 3D printer and you can't afford a cheap pair of safety specs, you probably shouldn't have bought a printer in the first place. It's like saying I've spent all this money on a car and I can't put the seatbelt on, kind of thing. Legionnaire says it sounds like it's better to get the curing and cleaning stations before you buy the 3D printer. When I did my video about buying my first 3D printer, I kind of went through all the different bits and pieces, and I think people think you just buy a printer and then you're kind of good to go. There's a lot of extra stuff that you have to buy to make the whole, like you need to buy sort of filters. You need to buy a funnel for putting resin back into your thing. You need to have trays to be able to kind of put things down while you're working on them, so you don't get resin all over the place. You need a nice area to basically do it. Like, it's not just a case of buying a 3D printer and you're done. It's not like buying like an inkjet printer and you just plug it into your computer and buy some paper and you're away kind of thing. There's a lot of ancillary stuff that you need to have when you're resin printing, and I think people forget all them bits and pieces. George, thank you very much there. Christian saying there, depends on the print and the layer height. Most prints, they aren't noticeable after priming and painting. Yeah, you're right, mate. Mark said, I don't wear glasses, but I don't splash the resin. I do have a ventilated room. I do wear gloves, sanding, and I do have a respirator. I would personally, mate, I always put safety specs on. I've got a pair of safety specs. They hang up next to my resin printer, and whenever I take that lid off, wherever there is a chance that anything could splash up, I just pop them on. Like, for the sake of just putting on a pair of safety specs. Like, for me, it just seems like a no-brainer. Like, why take the risk? Like, it doesn't seem worth kind of risking it for the sake of, like, it might never happen kind of thing. But that one time that it does, you'd be sure you'll know about it kind of thing. Yeah, Mark's saying there, resin isn't food safe, but it's safe to handle once cured. Yeah, and VJ says, I definitely know some hobbyists that would try putting resin minis in their mouth. Yeah, I guess there's no accounting for taste, eh? So you can't suck on one like a lollipop? Definitely not. Ed saying, when I saw the original, my first reaction was that someone who has worked at PP had gone for an easy nut shot. That was kind of my gut feeling as well, but I can't confirm or deny that. I've got no idea who posted that. But I would suggest that I can't imagine somebody, just like one person in a company, speaking on behalf of the whole company like that. It's the kind of post you would suggest that you kind of run by somebody, isn't it? It's a weird one. Yeah, Mark says, if you get resin on your fingers, if you're not wearing gloves, and expose it to UV light, you can burn yourself since the curing is exothermic. Yeah, somebody posted something in the Facebook group when we were chatting about this on Sunday I think it was, and it was a post from somebody who'd basically, they'd spilled some resin on their trousers or on their shorts, and basically panicked because it had spilled down the front of the printer, so they cleaned up the printer, and obviously they changed their shorts and stuff like that, and then basically didn't think to kind of clean it up themselves. And I don't think it went necessarily straight onto their skin. I think it went onto their clothes and must have seeped through onto their skin. And they said it felt a little bit hot, but didn't really kind of think anything of it. Thought it was just a bit of irritation. And the next day, like, their legs were all blistered and ended up going to A&E and basically had like sort of was it like third degree burns or something? And it was purely around like basically not washing it off, not cleaning it off. And they basically explained that, like, there's a number of things that they did wrong to get to that point in time, but not cleaning it off their skin immediately was the biggest thing that would have kind of helped, as opposed to not spilling it at all, if you like. Yeah, Jez is saying, when I first started gaming, the miniatures were full of lead. Lovely, safe, brain draining lead. Some of the paint was full of lead as well, mate, to be fair. Annie Bailey, good evening, Annie. How are you doing? Tony saying, I admitted I work with a different type of resin for water effects, but still operate with safety first. Gloves, goggles, ventilation. I guess you've just got to be careful, mate, haven't you? It's like anything, like I've worked with some nasty chemicals in the past. The first job I ever had was working in a factory that made printed circuit boards, and they basically used to dip the circuit boards in different like vats of chemicals to basically wash off the copper to wash off the copper, and leave the kind of the copper tracks behind. And some of those chemicals were awful. Like, you definitely, like, you don't mess about. You wore safety equipment, you wore glasses, you wore gloves, you kept the safe distance. Like there was kind of like safety showers on the line. So if you got splashed with any chemicals, you went straight under the shower and got washed, regardless of what you were wearing, kind of thing. Like, I guess I've just kind of grown up in industry where you take safety very, very sort of seriously. And like, I used to have people working for me when I worked in a factory, and like, safety was always the number one thing. Safety came before before kind of like output. It came before kind of like anything else. Safety was number one, quality was number second, and production was third kind of thing. So you always made sure that like everything was safe. So I guess I've just kind of like, I've spent most of my working life in an industry where sort of risk assessment, being safe, looking after yourself was just second nature. So I think that's maybe why I kind of just take it a bit more. It's not even about taking it a bit more seriously. I take it sort of with the right level of sort of sincerity. It's not like I'm in a hazmat suit and kind of like trying to do like a nuclear reactor, like sort of Homer Simpson type thing. I just wear the equipment you're meant to wear. Robin Mankiller says, Sup Jack, hello mate, how you doing? Pesla's saying, heck, I haven't even gotten a 3D printer yet, but you can trust my advice. I'm a stranger on the internet. It's interesting because I think like people forget about all this kind of stuff when it comes to 3D printing. 3D printing is about as easy as it's ever going to get, until the point where 3D printing is with resin that basically you never have to touch, or it's a chemical that isn't harmful at all or isn't dangerous at all. It's about as easy a process as it's going to get, and that's still a step too far for some people. And that's always been why I've said I don't think 3D printing is kind of like is the future in that respect, as in like it'll wipe out all miniature production kind of thing and everybody will just print at home. It's still inconvenient. I'm not saying it's difficult. It's inconvenient. You have to handle stuff with care. You have to like sort of have a big enough area to be able to sort of move things around safely without kind of like knocking bottles of resin over and kind of knocking vats and all this kind of stuff. And when you're scraping things off the build pit, you don't want to be flicking resin all over your kitchen sort of benches and stuff. Like, people need to have space and a suitable area to do that kind of stuff. And that's the reason that this isn't going to be kind of like a miniature, like kind of sort of, it isn't going to take over miniature gaming. That's the reason why. Not because it can't, but just because people, like in the same way that everybody's got a printer at home, but you can still buy books, for example. VJ says, yeah, the offer of help was 100% backhanded. It was just a bit weird. Like, it's like as if anybody's really going to take them up on that offer. It's a bit of a weird one, isn't it? James Bray, good evening, mate. How are you doing? He said he's trying to install new speakers after the old ones went pop. And Jez is saying, waving their 3D printer wanged about. The Hoff, good evening, says PP has a lot riding on these Mark IV changes, so I've no doubt they'll quickly address any issues that get found in the process. I think, to be honest, it's one of those things where Gen Con probably came... Are we getting spammed again? I think Gen Con probably came a bit quick for them, to the point where they weren't quite ready for it. And some of the stuff like is kind of sneaked through their kind of QA process, if you like. I'm pretty sure they'll be all over it now. Like, let's be honest, if anything gets out now, then it's just it's stupid now. But yeah, it's a weird one. Tony said, don't get splashy with resin, so apron isn't usually necessary, but we'll wear one when needed. I think it's more a case of just protecting your clothes, mate, as well. Like, you don't want resin on your clothes, do you? At least if you take off the apron where you're working, then it stays in that place. If there was anything splashed on it, you're not then carrying it around the house kind of thing. That's the way I would see it. Mark says, now removing supports, I sometimes wear safety glasses, but I usually am wearing a magnifying glass so I can snip accurately. I don't really snip mine, mate, to be fair. I put mine in a vat of warm water to basically soften them up, and then they just kind of peel off, really. And then I clean them up once they're kind of cured and dry and stuff. Paul saying, can't beat a bit of internet drama, eh? It's what makes the world goes around these days, mate. Ian saying, yeah, just screams of we left PP on not good terms, so let's show others that we no longer like PP. It's a weird one. Like I say, I can't even blame like ex-PP staff, because I've got no idea who posted the message. It might be nothing to do with them. It could be a pure coincidence, the fact that there are some ex-privately oppressed staff working there. But it's weird that they're like two companies in the same industry, in the same town, which like it's not like it's Nottingham where everybody's there kind of thing. This is like, it's just a bit of a strange one. Juan David Comancho says the problem is the premium price for an inferior product. 200 US is GW level price they're asking. So one of the things I was going to talk about, and I might do it in a bit more in depth, but like what people have to remember, and I think it's like a hidden cost that people always seem to forget, is that in every price, in that $200, there is a retailer margin in that. And there is a distributor margin in that. So it's not like Privateer Press are selling those miniatures for $200. I mean, they are at the moment because they're selling them direct. But when they go out to retail and they go into shops, they aren't selling them for $200. They're selling them for, let's say, $100 to a distributor. And that distributor sells them for $110 to a retailer. And then that retailer puts their margin on, and then they have to pay VAT on it. If it's a UK company, for example, they will probably discount it 20% down. So that, like, there's a huge chunk of the price we pay never ever gets to the manufacturer. And I think that's the bit like people forget, because somebody was saying the other day on one of my in my last video's comments, they were saying I can buy a file online for $5 and I can get somebody to print it for me on like Etsy or something for $8. Like, how can they sell 3 miniatures for $75? And it was like, so you're saying basically it's about $13 a miniature is what you're saying. So if you bought 3 miniatures, that would be, what's that, $39 for 3 miniatures, which you're saying is fine. Privateer Press are probably not selling it for $39, because by the time they sell it on, and by the time they've paid for packaging and artists and all that kind of stuff, and getting and like warehousing and all that kind of stuff, by the time they've done all that, then they've paid. Then there's a distributor cost gone on top of it. Then there's a retailer margin gone on top of it. It's probably even cheaper, but there's so many kind of parts to the process of getting something to a shelf in a retailer that I think people forget those bits. Like, that's in everything you buy. Like, if you buy a pair of kind of like Nike trainers, and I always say Nike trainers, so that's what I like, that's what I wear. If you buy a pair of Nike trainers, like, Nike don't get all of the money that you pay for them unless you buy them from the Nike website. If you buy them from your local sports store, like, Nike don't get all that money. If you buy an iPad, if you buy it from the Apple store, Apple will get the money. But if you buy it from sort of some like electrical company, then there's all sorts of distribution, and there's retailers, and they've got their margins and everything else. It's the same when you buy from GW. Like, GW prices might be high, and which is why I wouldn't like. I find it weird that people go direct to GW to buy the stuff, because basically, like, GW will make more money if you buy it direct, because they're basically cutting out the middleman, they're cutting out the distributor, they're cutting out all of the shipping costs, they're cutting out the retailer margins. All of that stuff gets cut out. So I know what you're saying about it's like a premium product for a premium price. It is when you're comparing it to GW versus GW, but I think when people compare it to 3D printing stuff yourself, like, it's night and day when it comes to that. Like, all of that cost is not in the product itself. Everybody else is kind of taking a cut along the way. Tony says, I'll reserve judgment till I see the finished product. Like War Machine, I like the War Machine minis, enjoy painting them, and I would like to take a pop at a new one when they're available. Yeah, exactly, mate. Yeah. And James says, these are the early adopter casts. The $200 boxes will be the next batch or two after the $75 are fulfilled. Yeah, that's exactly right, mate. And to be honest, I can't imagine anybody paying $200 is going to get sort of miniatures that look like that. I'm assuming that their QA control is going to be absolutely on the nose now. Tavinda, hello there, says, really seems that there's a divide in the community as to how harmful resin can be. Since I have my baby daughter at home, I moved it to the garage with a grow tent. My stuff is all in the garage here as well. It's not inside the house anymore. It's kept away from anything that could be dangerous at home, if you like. And he still always wears gloves, masks, apron. Yeah. VG says, oh, there's plenty of non-GW drama around. How about the Catalyst Pardo drama? I was just about to say I've got no idea what that is, but I do know what that is now. That's the what they called again, the BattleTech stuff, isn't it? Perham says, huge news just broke. GW contacted Cults 3D about removing models from their page. Cults took down the paid files but refused to take down the free files. Interesting. I think we're going to start seeing GW starting to clamp down a little bit on 3D sculpts now. I mean, there's a lot of people making sort of shoulder pads and all that kind of stuff. It's going to be interesting to see what happens there. That's obviously the next thing in their list of things to go after, isn't it? Personally saying, I've been doing a lot of research since I made my order, and I've found that there is a lot involved in prepping the prints, let alone actually printing them. 100%, mate. Like, if you're buying STL files from like a Patreon where they're pre-supported, it cuts down on a lot of the kind of the work that you need to do. But if you're just buying files that you need to support yourself, it's harder than it looks. Like, it takes a bit of practice. Yeah, Mark says, I bought the curing and cleaning station later. I think it's a good investment, but not required. A good container for your cleaning solution is fine, and you can cure it in the sun if needed. You obviously don't live in the northeast of England, mate. There is no sun. Jess says, I had super glue spills burn through jeans and carpet. Yeah, I've done that as well, mate, to be fair. Camo says, did you discuss the smell? I've not gotten one as my wife complains about even plastic glue. I think it depends, mate. Some of them smell worse than others. But to be fair, you need to put your printer in a ventilated area. You need to be able to have a good airflow so that it's not kind of hanging around and building up in the room. You should be wearing kind of a mask on if the sort of, you know, if you're in there for any long length of time, as an example. I personally don't smell it, but it doesn't mean that it's safe, if that makes sense. To be honest, I smell the isopropyl alcohol. I find that is a stronger smell than the resin itself, if I'm honest. But that's my personal experience with the resin that I buy. It could be completely different from different resins. Yeah, Super Pumpkin Man says, when I first grown up around using power tools and sharp objects that can sometimes move very fast. Yeah, safety first. And Perham saying they're working on that. Some high-end printers now print, wash and cure all in the same unit. Yeah, and I guess that's kind of like it is the next step. I still think it's going to be a step too far, mate, for some people. Ed says, years ago I worked in Courtaulds Chemicals in Spondon, just outside of Derby. There was stuff on that site would have taken out about a third of the city if it had gone up. Safety was always number one. The place where I served my apprenticeship basically had... Oh, what's it called again? There's a chemical gas that is really, really nasty. Oh, cyanide. That was it. It had cyanide gas. An ammonia gas was on site. And because I worked in maintenance, I was an engineer. We were part of the kind of response team to basically go in and fix any issues. And we all had to be trained on that sort of stuff. Well, basically what they did was they had gold in liquid form inside tanks. To basically gold plate circuit boards, and to stop people stealing the gold was held in cyanide. So there was a chemical process that would remove the gold through gold plating, and basically stick them to the boards like through electrolysis. And but they were held in cyanide, like, so there was all sorts of stuff like that. That's what I mean about safety and stuff. It was a different world back then. VJ says, you've got to put that minimum sub time for commenting on, mate. I have, mate. It is already on, but I'm assuming the bots must subscribe and then get round it. Spunky Taz says, to be honest, I find the smell of IPA way worse. Yeah, that's just what I was saying, mate, yeah. I think what I'll have to try, there's ways round kind of blocking them out and stuff, but I'll have to try and find a way to do it, to be fair. Lord Maiden says, I've worked for a company that had someone use an angle grinder between their legs with shorts on. Oh, where the warehouse staff still work with no protection. Yeah, people do that, yeah. Thanks, Christian, as well, for sorting that out, mate. Simon Davis is if Luke from Geek Gaming Scenics wears gloves when messing with 3D printers, you know it's not safe. Yeah. Mark says, I have some models that use really fine point that need support. You can just soak those in hot water and move the support on those, so you have to clip. Or you can't just, I think you're saying, yeah, you can't, yeah. Christian sharing the Amazon affiliate link there as well. Thank you, mate. Mark saying, what's the outcome? Is it safe? Have I knocked 5 years off my life? It's safe if you follow the procedures, mate, essentially. Mark saying, some Meccano Spider minis or fin bits of fine bits of hair on some models. If you just pull those off, you don't get repeatable results. I see what you mean, mate. I think, to be honest, if you had really fine bits, I think you can normally orientate them in a different way so that you're not really having to support them. I think sometimes that's the preferred way, isn't it? Simon Daisy, I feel like GW costs are high to account for the discounts most third-party stores give. I think there's an element of that, mate. I think they know that most stores are going to discount it down, so there is some of that factored in there. There has to be, otherwise, like, it just doesn't make sense, does it really? But yeah, I think. But my point being is, I think a lot of people forget the fact that there's so many steps from the person that makes the product to the person that sells the product to you on a shelf in a store. There are so many people in that kind of process taking their pound of flesh along the way that, like, if you got rid of the stores and you bought direct from the manufacturer, in theory, everything could be cheaper. But then you wouldn't have any stores, you wouldn't have any businesses with people working in them. Like, all of the people that are delivery drivers and all them kind of stuff. Like there's a whole industry in there, because that's people's jobs, and people, you know, it's all those bits and pieces. It's just that people forget about that. Like, they instantly go, "Oh, X company's prices are too high," but the amount of money that they're making from that product isn't based upon the selling price that you buy. It's based upon the selling price to the distributor, or the selling price to the retailer. Perham says, I build my own gaming furniture. I can build a table like Wormwood makes for $300. That doesn't make Wormwood tables worth any less. It's a lot of work. No, it just means that you're willing to accept a smaller margin, and it might also mean that you're not having to deal with distributors, or you don't have overheads, you don't have a factory. Like, there's all sorts of things to look into. Super Pumpkin Man says, I agree. No one understands that you can't sell anything at cost because of all the other factors and outside cost included. 100%, mate, yeah. Yeah, VJ saying a garage or a basement's the way to go. It definitely is if you've got the space, mate, yeah. Dwarven Darkness says, setting up my 3D printer inside, purchase an air purifier in hopes it will take care of the fumes and dangerous airborne. I think as long as you need carbon filters, really, to be fair, mate, I think, to get rid of resin fumes. I think it normally needs to have a carbon filter to pull the fumes through to get rid of them. And yeah, Christian saying GW costs are high because of their overheads. People don't take into account the cost of running their stores, offices, paying staff. I mean, don't get me wrong, mate. I mean, they could make things cheaper purely based upon the fact that they could accept lower profits. Like, but then you could say that about every company. Every company could accept lower profits. But when you're a publicly listed company, I should say, and you're on the stock market, your reason for being is to make more profit next year than you did this year, and make more profit the year after. So they're never going to drop their profit margins. If anything, things are going to get more expensive to increase their margins. Clavax says, I watched the Middle Earth Twitch stream the other day, and every message that referenced 3D printing was being immediately erased. Interesting. Mark says, I'm now in Utah, so we get lots of sun. Yeah, I'll just send you my miniatures to Cure, mate. It'll take months if I put them in the sun here. Yeah, VJ saying ISO is worse than resin for him as well. Babalosh says, I still hope for some non-toxic resin in the future. I think at some point it might become a thing, but I think it'll only become a thing if there's a big enough need for it. Like, if everybody's quite happy to go ahead and use it, like, nobody's like doing anything about it. It'll be the first person that goes to hospital for drinking this stuff. That'll be what sort of changes it. And I am not suggesting anybody drinks it, by the way. It's just jumping around a little bit. Let me get back there. Dwarven Darkness says, aren't there alternatives to ISO? There are, mate. I mean, you can get water washable resin, which obviously doesn't need isopropyl alcohol. And people also use things like Windoline as well, don't they? Is it Windoline? Like, kind of window cleaner. People use a number of different... some people use... what's it called? I think you use methylated spirits as well. So I think there are other things you can use, but I think ISO is kind of the most common. Mark says, mental health of resin printing, so many grey models and so many more STLs to get. I think, to be honest, mate, most people who have a problem buying STLs don't print out the files. That's the problem. And because they're not taking up space, they're stuck on a hard drive somewhere. nobody ever gets to question it, I think. Dwarven Darkness says Luke doesn't use ISO from what I've seen in his video. Not sure what he uses. Is it super green? I don't recall it. I think he might use methylated spirits, I think, but I can't remember. Busey saying plastic glue smells nice. Resin smells funny. I don't think any of it smells nice, mate, if I'm honest. And yeah, Paul saying you can buy water washable resin. That's what I'm using at the minute. Actually, I've got water washable resin. I just bought a vat to a bottle to try it, and I think I prefer the ABS like resin over the water washable stuff. And Perham saying, yeah, they sell carbon filters for that purpose. Yeah, exactly, mate. Paul says there was a guy who looked into the toxic fumes theory and found that resin printers do not emit toxic fumes. The only 3D print method that has any airborne toxicity was an FDM using ABS. I don't know, mate. I haven't seen that, but as far as I'm concerned, if it stinks, I don't want to breathe it in, if I'm being perfectly honest. Yeah, Invisible says, good evening all, hope everyone's doing well. I love my 3D printer, but I accept I have to follow safety standards, gloves and mask. Yeah, it's about how you handle these stuff. Like as I said before, like water's dangerous. People die in water. Like, you know, how many is it? Oh, there was some stupid fact that I saw recently about the number of people that die from like home accidents, and it was unbelievable. Why do we keep getting those? Why does that keep coming back? That's blooming weird. Anyway, I don't know why this is what happens when you start getting people watching. It's almost like when you hit a certain number, the bots come out. I'll have to have a look into trying to stop that. Coleman Dan says manufacturing costs for GW would be high because when you are initially creating new molds for injection molding, it costs loads. I think the problem with that, mate, is there are other people who create plastic injection molded miniatures who don't cost as much as GW. I think this is why. But then by the same stretch, those companies are accepting a lower profit margin, if you like, or maybe those companies only sell direct, so therefore they cut out the middleman, they cut out the shops, they cut out the retailer margins and all that kind of stuff. There's a whole host of reasons why some people are cheaper than others. Waffles Enjoyer says, is it true that Privateer Press was making people walk the plank into vats of boiling UV resin? Should we call the police? I think those reports have been widely over-speculated. Luke Pigeon says, I bought a printer a while ago and have used it twice, just don't have the space. I'm contemplating a shed, but £350, the costs keep adding up. This is the thing, I mean, there comes a point where, like, I'll be honest, like I've got a Resin 3D printer and I use it for like bits and pieces. Like I don't print miniatures with it. Like it's a nice little thing to have, and I get use out of it, like making nice kind of resin bases for my miniatures. I make some nice little bits of scatter terrain and stuff. I've printed off like resin busts to paint rather. But I don't use it for miniatures. I just find like you spend so much time looking online for like certain miniatures for certain things, that actually like it becomes more of a chore sometimes actually than it is just to buy the minis you like. Yeah, Spunky Taz is saying if I print out every STL file I own, I'd need a 3D print an extension to the house. I think there's a few people in that way, mate. VJ was saying, speaking of molds for polystyrene minis, anyone listen to the latest Paint Bravely podcast? Interesting to hear 3D printers can now actually do more detail than the CNC machines for metal molds. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, mate, like those molds are basically kind of like they're engineered out to a really fine tolerance. But I think technically now the latest generation of printers can print to a finer tolerance than that. Mark saying, I use water washable. My models can take a drop, but I still do get some spear breakages. I wonder if other resins are better and the alcohol than the alcohol washers. If you check out Hellstorm Wargaming, they did a really good video recently comparing lots of different resins and basically did like drop tests and twist tests and bend tests, and it was interesting to see the differences. Ralph Holman, well, good evening to you. How are you doing? 10 Sketches. I had a 3D printer for over a year, sat in a box behind me because I simply do not have space to set them up. Thanks, Tiny UK House Standards. I'm dying to bloody use the thing. I'm not being funny, mate, but did you not think of that before you bought it? Yeah, and Oni Ryu says they also don't make rules. That was another thing as well when somebody was saying to me about the price of, I can just buy an STL and I can just get somebody to print it out for me. And it's like, yeah, but those people that are like doing those things don't have to develop games. Let's be honest, they may not be paying taxes. like they might not be worried about like their overheads of like running a factory and paying people's health insurance and all those kind of things, HR and all of that. Where was that one? Yeah. Oni Ryu says companies like Mantic, PP and GW pay people to make the games. Yeah, they do. Which is why, to be fair, when PP are now they are now giving the game away for free, is even more impressive, to be fair. Like Mantic give away a lot of rules for free as well. It's more common than you think now. I'm going to do a video on that in the near future about like free rules, because it's almost like people seem to accept the fact that GW still sell their books and that you can't get free rules. And I know Warcry technically now has some free rules, but I think that's almost not by design. It's almost by situation. But it's still kind of commonly accepted. Well, GW need to sell books to pay for the rules kind of thing. And it's like everybody else is giving away free rules now. They might still sell books because people like nice artwork and they like the stories and the background information and all that kind of stuff, and they like nice printed material. But technically, like, so many companies give away the rules for free now. Christian Cheney loves these 3D printers, uses them regularly. I like mine, mate. I'll be honest. I do like them, and I find them really useful. But I wouldn't say it's like one of those things where they're constantly running away in the background. I go through phases of like having to print stuff that I want for them. James says my biggest problem is I actually want a 50mm scale because then FDM is more viable. Yeah, FDM for miniatures is not great, to be fair. Good for terrain and stuff, terrain making, big pieces of stuff. Yeah, and Camo saying, what about the other type of printer, the plastic string one? Yeah, like I say, it's great for printing like 3D sort of bits of terrain, big chunky bits of stuff. It's not great for printing kind of fine detail miniatures. Yeah, James says I have limited time in a predictable manner, and resin printers require more pre-work and post-work. Yeah, I would agree with that. Mark Zielinski, hello mate. He says can't wait for GW to give away free codexes. Yeah, I'd like to see it happen, but I can't ever see it happening. I think it's this is what I mean. It's like everybody, like I can't think of many other companies now who only have paid for rules and stuff. Like if you think about like Infinity from Corvus Belli, but free rules online, all the stats are free online. They even have a free app for list building and stuff as well. If you think about Malifaux from Weird, free rules online, free stats online, free app online, free app as well for list building and for all of the stat cards. Wild West Exodus and Dystopian Wars, free rules online, free stats online. Mantic, majority of their games, free rules online, free stats, even if the stats are through Easy Army. War Machine from Privateer Press, free stats, free rules, free War Room app as well online. Like there are so many companies now where the entire game, like the rules, if you want to try the game out or if you want to kind of like access them, they are free to access. Major Tom there saying Legion and Marvel Crisis Protocol. Yeah, I forgot about those two, mate. Free. Both of those are free as well. Paul saying the last Infinity expansion book was 99% lore with about 20 pages of scenarios. There were no new rules at all. Still bought the book and I still love the book. GW could learn from that. I think they could, mate, to be fair. I think like the fact that like people do like the lore and people will be willing to pay for the lore. And the background stories and stuff and beautiful artwork and all of them kind of things. It's the churn of rules and the need to buy new books to keep up to speed. I think that kind of frustrates people. John saying all the core GW rules are free on their apps. The core rules might be free, mate, but you can't play the game. Like, none of the stats are free. Like, it's all right saying the rules are free, but then there are no stats for them. You have to buy the codexes. There are rules in the codex that aren't in the rule book, for example. So it's all right saying the rules are free, but the rules are not free, really. You can't play the game with the free rules. John saying, Mantic, most games offer some rules free, the core, but usually only a couple of scenarios, but great to try out. Yeah, and I, do you know what it is? I don't think there's anything wrong with paying for scenarios and stuff like that. Like, if you just want to play the game, you can just play the game for free in that respect. Yeah, like scenarios or extra stuff. Yeah, I don't mind paying for like extra stuff. To be honest, I don't necessarily mind paying for rules, but not when it's become the standard that you don't. Like, one-page rules, everybody's singing their praises about how the rules are free and all that kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, everybody's rules are free pretty much. It's just that they're always compared to GW. It's always a GW alternative. It's always a 40k alternative. And it's like, oh, their rules are free. Their rules are easy to play. And it's like, there are so many games out there that rules are free and rules are easy to play. Let's have a look here. Yeah, Type 40 Tardis saying Rumble Slam, Carnivale, free rules as well, 100%. Yeah, Ralph is saying one-page rules is working on lore books for their worlds. Mark says, are the Warcry Codex now free? Has that happened yet? It's kind of happened accidentally, I think, mate. It sounds like they've got some issue with the books getting out, and I think they're getting printed or getting delivered or whatever, and it seems like they've started to release them for free, like for fear of basically everybody just walking away from the game, I think. Perham says, I'll happily buy stuff if I don't feel like I'm being ripped off or conned. We have to ask why it feels GW is doing what others aren't. Yeah. Mark says, Moonstone not only gives the rules away for free, they're free standees for all of the characters too. Very true, Mark. The first game I ever saw that was Guild Ball, actually. They did that. That basically, I think they called them like paper dolls. And all of the rules were free. All of the stats were free. And you could actually like sort of just print off on a home printer, not a 3D printer, a physical old school inkjet printer. You could print off like sort of standees to replace the models to basically play the game and try it out. Perham says most Mantic games are mini agnostic, so I don't mind buying the rules. I completely disagree with that, mate. I actually find it quite frustrating that people think Mantic games are miniature agnostic. Like, they're no more miniature agnostic than any other game. They are no more miniature agnostic than Warhammer 40k. Like, Mantic make models for their game. They sell models for their game. Like, their games are not miniature agnostic. Like, you can use any models you want, but then you can use any models you want with any game. Games that are miniature agnostic are games that don't have models attached to them. So, for example, like Rangers of Shadow Deep is a game technically that you use whatever models you want because there aren't any Rangers of Shadow Deep models. Like, it's like saying Star Wars Legion is model mini agnostic because you can just use what you want. Like, or Marvel Crisis Protocol's mini agnostic because you can 3D print some models. So I always find it weird. People keep saying Mantic's mini agnostic. It's not. It definitely is not. John says all the AOS War Scrolls are freely available. Not a fanboy for GW, but they're not always the Great Satan. The War Scrolls might be free, but there are still rules hidden away inside every single. You still need a codex. The War Scrolls might be free, but the points aren't free. You have to buy you got to buy the General's Handbook to get the points. James is saying GW could always sell big collectors' lore books for their armies. I just can't believe anyone actually buys them to get the stats. Yeah, just look at what they used to do for the Imperial armor books and stuff like that. Look at how well the Horus Heresy books sell. People are willing to buy kind of lore and background books. Like, the rules don't need to be paid for. They don't need to be monetized. John said, I think Mantic have a good balance. You can try them for free, and then if you enjoy, invest and put something into development. Yeah, I agree with that, mate. I agree with that. Perham Perham saying Mantic lets you play in their official tournaments with any models. GW won't. I think that's more about, mate. I think that's more about that their audience, they realise that their audience is smaller. They just want people to try their games and hopefully convert them over. That doesn't mean that they're actively encouraging you to use whatever you want. They would much rather you use the models that they sell, obviously. But then I guess that's the same with any company. And it's more about like if you go to your local game store and you are playing with models that you've 3D printed or whatever, like that game store's not doing any, like it's not supporting that game store, is it? So I don't think there's many companies who will force you to use their models other outside of GW, to be fair. John saying there are plenty of specific ranges of Shadow Deep minis. Yeah, well, maybe Ranges of Shadow Deep has a miniatures range now, like the way Frostgrave does. I know Stargrave does as well. But there are plenty of other games out there like that basically are model mini agnostic in terms of they do not have a miniatures range attached to them. Waffles Enjoy says, I think miniature agnostic means the rules aren't written to have specific requirements of the minis. 40k's unit war gear options and what you see is what you get culture makes it less agnostic. But I don't think that's a game specific thing. I think that's a community specific thing. It is the community that puts pressure on each other to use 40k minis in games of 40k. There's no reason why you can't use whatever you want. I think it's a community thing. It's almost a bit of gatekeeping that goes on. I think that's very different. RPD says, sorry for late joining. Don't worry, mate. He says, FWW books like rules and points are free. Just need to buy the cards or use the app. FWW. I don't know what don't know what that is, mate. Sam, hello, mate. He says, aloha from Maui. I think, the Broken Level Miniatures, if they were really concerned, should have reported PP to the Federal Trade Commission. I think the problem is, mate, as I said this before, is they never said anything about privateer press. It was a very obvious dig at them, but they never named them. They never said that's what they were talking about. And that was what was smart about it. Fallout Wasteland Warfare. Thank you very much, mate. Perham says, I 3D print almost all my armies, but I make doubly sure I shower my local game store in money, so they never get grumpy when I show up. Books, paints, and all sorts of stuff. You might do that, mate, but a lot of people don't, to be fair. Spunky Tal says maker spaces are something that hasn't really taken off in the UK. The closest we get is a bunch of old blokes in sheds. Yeah, I know what you mean, mate. I think it's because everybody kind of thinks they can do it themselves, don't they? RG says miniature agnostic rule set 5 parsecs from home. Use what you want. That's the opening pages. Great solo tabletop experience. That's kind of what I'm getting at. I think of miniature agnostic games as games that do not have any miniatures attached to them. Like a lot of Osprey games, for example. A lot of the Osprey rule sets are just a rule set that you buy and you specifically use whatever minis you like because there is nothing clearly defined as such. That's kind of what I'm getting at. But if a company sells a miniatures range, even if they are comfortable with you using whatever you want, I wouldn't suggest that game or that company then suddenly becomes a miniature agnostic kind of rule set, if you like. Yeah, RPD saying like Gaslands, yeah. Sam Takara says, moreover, BAM should know there's a difference between mass production costs, time and workflow compared to a hobbyist doing the work for free. I think their original post was done drunk. It did kind of concern me that it might have been done after a few beers, mate, to be fair. Saul says, a miniature agnostic game is any game that allows you to use any miniatures you want. Having a miniature range is not irrelevant. But then any game, this has always been my point, mate, then any game is miniature agnostic. Like, because you can use any miniatures you want in any game. I have said this like so many times. Like, I'm not suggesting what I'm saying is the definitive like sort of explanation. It's how I differentiate games. So when I'm talking about miniature agnostic games, I am talking about the ones that don't have a miniatures line. If a company has miniatures for their specific games, then I would suggest they are miniatures, like they are a rule set that has miniatures attached, but you can choose to use whatever miniatures you want. That's the difference. Like that's kind of where I'm defining the lines. I'm not saying that is the global sort of defined definition. That's what I'm kind of that's what I'm kind of getting at. Yeah, RBD says got to go. Only wanted to stop and say hi. Thanks, buddy. Nice to see you. Must contain minis. Hello, mate. Says I remember way back when I first got into 40k, a friend couldn't understand why anyone would pay $50 for a Carnifex when he felt you could proxy an empty Coke can as a Carnifex. There's plenty of people there sort of proxy lots of different things. Ian saying the only love in this chat is for each other, not for websites trying to sell bodies. 100%, mate. Never get passionate about a company. Like never give a company your kind of love. Do you know what I mean? A company isn't a thing. You might like some of the work that the people that work at that company do, but like the company does not deserve your love. We shouldn't be given our love and appreciation to inanimate things. You can appreciate the work that people working for that company do, but not the company itself. Paul says, I'm with BlackJack Legacy on this. Miniature Agnostic is a game that doesn't have support and mini range specifically designed for it, and that seems to be generally accepted definition. It's kind of how I define it, mate. I don't know whether it's right or whether it's wrong. But like that's how I would define it, and I think that's maybe sometimes where people maybe misunderstand what I'm saying about that sort of, you know, like my feelings on mini agnostic games. I think people maybe misunderstand it. Like my point has always been any game can be mini agnostic. Like you buy the miniatures that you like that's what everybody should do, really. But don't feel that sort of but don't feel, for example, a Mantic game is any more miniature agnostic than a Games Workshop game. They can be sort of treated equally as agnostic, if you like. Where were we up to here? VG says, depends if you define your hobby by what you want to do or what the company wants you to do. There is that, mate, yeah. Ian was referring to the love bot. I'm alright with a bit of free love. Ian says, what are you on about companies for? Because that's what I'm saying, mate, when we're saying about people who say that they love companies, you know, people who love GW or hate GW. It shouldn't be about loving a company. I don't love any companies. I've got no loyalty to a company itself. There are people who work for certain companies who I really enjoy the work that they do, and I might have some loyalty to to the work that they produce because I like what they do, but it's not to the company itself. That's the point I'm making. Waffles Enjoyer says the only company that might be worthy of that is a worker co-op or non-profit. But even then, even then, that is still an idea. It's a concept that is being created by a person. It's not like the company isn't the kind soul kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? James says, what you place games that supply standees? I don't think that's a miniatures rage in that respect, mate. I would still class it as I think that's just them helping you get started and give the game a try, really. I would still class them as mini agnostic kind of thing. They're not expecting you to only use standees and not buy miniatures to replace them, for example. John Bruce says, what's this the Black Anvil and Privately Press thing? I'm going to be putting it as a video tomorrow, mate. You'll be able to see it. I'll kind of clip it out and let people catch up on it in that respect. So yeah, we'll do that tomorrow, mate. Let's have a little look here. Yellow Belly Tabletop, hello. It says, talking to Mantic, I play Kings of War almost exclusively with all GW fantasy collections. That's fine, mate. There was a lot of people used to play Warhammer Fantasy almost exclusively with Mantic minis because they were cheap. It's fine. You play any game you want with any minis you want. Where are we up to here? Sundered Sykes says, I would pose that loving a company is similar to loving a sports team. These days a sports team is very close to a company. I think that's more to do with marketing and branding, mate. I think you can love a sports team because I don't think when if you say let's say you love Manchester United, for example, right, for a sports team, I don't think you don't love the board, you don't love the chairman, you don't love the shareholders, you don't love you don't love the company that is Manchester United PLC. You support the club, you support what it stands for, you support like a common goal that you want your team to do well. So I think that's different when it comes to sports teams. Like people who say that they love GW or that they love Apple, for example, I think that's a bit weird. Like I think it's a different concept to supporting your football team. And Mark's saying there, like players come and go. Yeah, players come and go, and teams can do well and teams can do bad. But your team, for example, it's an identity. It's like almost like a tribal thing, I think, as opposed to kind of like loving a company. Mark's saying the old saying is love the team, not the players. Same for games companies. Yeah, I think that's my point I was making before. Really, is that there are people who work for companies who I like the work that they do. Yeah. James says, reason is BattleTech is technically agnostic then in the overall. I wouldn't consider it agnostic, mate, in terms of the fact that there is a BattleTech miniatures line, isn't there? Like you can buy a starter box with miniatures in it. Therefore, it technically has a miniatures line as far as I'm aware. Ed saying, little remembered fact, Rogue Trader came with cardboard cutout tokens in the back of the book for the forces in the scenario in it. I think a lot of GW stuff back in the day like that used to come with like things like cardboard terrain as well, didn't it? Things have changed a lot over the years. Yeah, Ed saying sports teams are 100% companies now. I guess that's just more to do with when money gets involved, mate, as opposed to the actual thing. Where was it? Yellow Belly Tabletop says team loyalty is an exhibition of human beings' natural tendencies towards tribalism. Yeah, I think large companies are exploiting this. I think, do you know what it is, mate? It is a form of mass manipulation, because what they do is they basically their marketing now these days is very much, it's been analysed really to appeal to people, to appeal to them on a personal level. It's why targeted marketing through things like sort of like social media and stuff, and like really kind of playing into people's mentality of being like, this is for you kind of thing. It's a weird one. Mark says BattleTech just released a new starter set at Gen Con. Yeah, I think I saw something about that flying about, mate. Waffles and Joy says Infinity's cardboard terrain in their last few 2-player boxes has been pretty cool. Yeah, I think it's a bit of a different level there, cardboard terrain though, to most, isn't it? It's not that kind of really sort of paper like terrain type thing. This is like almost feels like plastic. Sometimes it's so thick. Ed says, I still have the cardboard buildings from Bloodbath at Orcs Riff. I don't half look comically small next to modern minis. I don't even know what that is, mate, if I'm honest. John says, I have nostalgia for the GW standees for the models I couldn't afford. Yeah, it was all before my time, mate. I wasn't aware of any of that stuff. John says, people love belonging to a supporters club or exclusive group who play one game or use one product over another. And I've got no problem with people being part of a community or being part of a group of people who all like the same thing. Like it might be all like sort of all play 40k or whatever it is. It's okay to be a community. It's all right to support like something like that. But to love a company is very different. Superpunk Man says, I think it might be better to report the bot, not just block them. I'm not blocking them, mate. They're basically, I have been clicking in the background when it comes through. That's the first one I've clicked, to be honest. I'm not just deleting the messages. I am actually trying to do something about it, but I'm assuming they're different bots, to be fair. Yeah. Ed says, I think Warhammer Battle Campaign pack based on Zulu. Oh, is that that's the thing you were talking about? Yeah, I'm not familiar with that, mate. Ian says he's reporting them for spam as well. Yeah, it's weird. It goes through phases. I think every now and again these things kind of these things crop up. I don't know why they come up. yeah. We'll see what happens anyway. It's nice to know that you're popular enough that the spam bots come in and give you a little bit of love anyway. It's like saying the bot just wants the world to love each other. I haven't even been reading what they're saying, to be fair, mate. I've just been deleting them. So, I need a drink of water anyway. My throat's drying out there a little bit. Ian saying GW sent the hit bots. It wouldn't surprise me, mate. So yes, while I remember, folks, so I won't be here for the next 2 Mondays. There'll be no live stream next Monday. There'll be no live stream the Monday after. There will be some video content for you to watch while I'm away, but there's no live streams because I'm on holiday. So there you go. Ed says, how have you lived in the UK for more than 5 minutes and never seen Zulu? I don't really watch war films, mate. That's why. Pesla says the Slanesh bots pop up in several other live streams as well. It's weird, isn't it? I don't know. Maybe it's obviously like a live stream thing, but I don't know why they do it. Vijay says companies no love, sports teams no love, bands. Now that's a different thing. It depends. Some bands are pretty corporate now, mate, to be fair. Clyde Dashing, hello, mate. He's saying enjoy the holiday. Thank you very much, mate. I intend to. My plan is to get plenty of sunshine on my skin, plenty of vitamin D. To just soak up the rays, drink plenty of fine wine and whiskey and smoke cigars and chill out for a couple of weeks. Ian says, do you like Michael Caine? I like Get Carter and I like Michael Caine in like in the Batman films and stuff like that. Like he's been in some good films. I'm just not really into war films, mate, that's all. Bruce says chocolate gives vitamin D. Chocolate gets me fat, mate. That's my problem. V says don't forget the ice cream. Yes, and plenty of ice cream, mate, as well. Yes. Italian Job. I forgot about that one. Yeah, Italian Job's a good movie. What's the other one I'm thinking of as well? Harry Brown. Harry Brown was a good film as well with Michael Caine. Super Pumpkin Man says I've decided my August painting challenge will be the All Ghost. So more Night Hunt for this month. Nice one, mate. Pesler says that Michael Caine was better in Muppets Christmas Carol. Redwell says long live the Walking Dead All Out War. Yeah, there's a good. That's the game that got me into doing YouTube videos. To be fair, I do love a bit of Walking Dead. Busey says don't forget the sunscreen, forget the ice cream. I always put lotion on me. I'm pretty good, man. I must admit I don't tend to fry too badly. So yeah, but I always do put it on. Egan says just think of it like Attack of the Minas Tirith, but set in the real world. I know Minas Tirith is Lord of the Rings, but I don't like that either, mate. We've been through this many times. I'm not a fan of Lord of the Rings. Vicky says might be time to head off to the cafe for a bacon sandwich. Do it, mate. Do it. I haven't had a bacon sandwich. Mate, since since you were here. That was the last bacon sandwich I had, man. That was some time ago. Anyway, I think that's probably not a bad time to start to wrap things up now. So yes, tomorrow I'll be putting up the clips video for tonight's chat. So those folks that don't watch the whole stream or whatever, I also tend to edit them a little bit as well and chop some of the rambly bits out and maybe put some extra images in. So even if you've seen tonight, you might still want to watch tomorrow. I do appreciate the support. So watch out for that one. What else was I going to say? Watch out. There should be some announcements while I'm away on holiday as well. I might still be doing a bit of work, shall we say. I'm thinking of taking my laptop with me at the end. I wasn't going to, but I think I'm going to have to. There'll be at least one announcement while I'm away as well, so watch out for that one about something that I'm going to be doing in the next few months. Those of you that have listened to the Patreon podcast will probably already know what that is, so keep it to yourself if that's the case. Clyde, thank you very much for the super chat, buddy. Really appreciate the support. Really does make a difference, so thank you for that. Mark saying I like the clips videos. It seemed to go down well, mate. It did pretty good views. Bearing in mind the same information was in the live stream, the clips videos did like sort of 6 or 7 times better. So yeah, I was happy with that. Thank you everybody saying having a good time. I will certainly drink plenty of fluids but not water. Mark saying another shot of resin. So thank you very much, folks. Take care. I will certainly be posting messages and stuff like that. So if you don't follow me on Twitter, please follow me on Twitter as well, @BlackJack Legacy. If you don't follow me on Instagram, you can follow me there as well. Don't forget to come and join the Facebook group. I'll still be doing my Saturday morning kind of weekly roundups to see what everybody's up to. But yeah, you won't be seeing me in live streams for a couple of weeks. But I will be back on Monday. We did say the 29th, didn't we? Let me check my diary again. It was, yeah, Monday the 29th of August. We'll be back with the next live stream. So, take care, folks. Our bots back again, as they always are. So yeah, good time to go. See you later, folks.